What's up, everyone? Jared Sandler here. It is an off day in Surprise, so I figured we'd do a little Q&A. If you didn't get a question in this time around, I'll do this again, and I usually will solicit questions either on Twitter, maybe sometimes on Facebook, Reddit, what have you. But these are the questions that we got from Reddit and from Twitter in no particular order. Figure let's fire away. By the way, I did say we'd do a Leote dive today. I forgot that I sort of in my head wanted to use today as the Q&A day, so we'll get into Leote tomorrow. All right, this question from Sergeant Salty. Do you think Joey will keep up this pace? I think referring to his 3 home runs in 3 spring training games. And how much are we expecting out of Akihara in the regular season? I don't think Joey's going to average a home run per game. I am expecting Joey to get back to something that more closely resembles his 2019 All-Star form. And as far as what that means for the Rangers, I still think that probably means that on August 1st he's playing elsewhere. But who knows? You know, the Rangers said they will have discussions about an extension. The problem is Scott Boras is Joey Gallo's agent, and Scott Boras rarely has clients who sign extensions before they've hit free agency. As far as Akihara, I think, the hope is that he's a guy who will eat innings. This is not a guy who has the upside, the talent that Yu Darvish had when he came over. Obviously, the financials are way different too. I think the Rangers' hope is that Akihara is solid. And just a worthwhile member of the rotation, I think is a fair expectation and sort of what the Rangers are hoping. I know that's not the sexy answer that people want to hear, but I think that's just the honest, realistic answer. If things translate really well for him, maybe he is better than expected. I mean, with guys who come from these Asian leagues, whether it's the KBO or, in Japan, sometimes it's tough to know how the exchange rate is going to play out, so to speak. So it could be better, but I think the Rangers' hope is just someone who's going to be a solid part of the rotation. This one from Zach: is anyone challenging Joe Palumbo for most swag on the club? Yeah, actually. Now, I don't know if he's going to make the big league team out of camp. He almost certainly won't, although I think there's a chance he's there at some point this year. And by the way, Joe Palumbo might not make the big league club out of camp, but Steele Walker is the swaggiest guy in camp here this spring and probably the swaggiest guy in the organization. Out of Oklahoma University, went to Prosper. The Rangers acquired him in the Nomar Mazara deal. Steele Walker, he is the swag master part of this organization. This from Dustin: what is Odor's place on the team? Will the Rangers sign a veteran third baseman? Has Guzman played well enough to be an outfielder and first baseman on the team? So 3 separate questions. Let's attack each. Odor's place on the team is probably someone who, in a perfect world, if he is on the team, is off the bench and able to play second and third. I don't know. And I think there's a question later on about whether or not Odor makes the team. I think that is a toss-up. I think that there are those who probably, will continue to pine for him. And then I think there are going to be those who are on the other side of the fence. I don't think there's a consensus when it comes to Rougned Odor. The challenge is if he doesn't add third base as a viable option, what is he really giving you off the bench? He's a lefty on a roster with the starting lineup with plenty of lefties. He plays second and that's it. There's no real utilitarian nature to what he does. So I don't know. What his role is not going to be, I can tell you, is opening day second baseman. Or everyday second baseman. That is not going to be his role unless there's an injury that changes that. Will the Rangers sign a veteran third baseman? They did, Brock Holt. And has Guzman played well enough to be an outfielder and first baseman on the team? I mean, it's been a week, so it's tough to know. I'm still not convinced that Guzzi will be able to play outfield well enough, and that's no knock on him. I think sometimes we take for granted, how tough it is to just change positions or add another position. It's tough for a guy like Rugi, who's played the infield, to move within the infield from second to third. So imagine how tough it is for a guy like Ronald Guzman, who's been a first baseman his whole career, now being asked to go play left field when speed and quickness would not be considered strengths of his. At the end of the day, if Guzzi hits, they'll find a place for him, I'd imagine. The challenge is if he hits really well in spring, it makes it that much tougher to get him through waivers. He's out of options. So maybe the fact that he won the Dominican Winter League MVP alone would entice a team to lay claim to him if the Rangers were try to get him through waivers. But if he's going to hit, if the Rangers believe in the adjustments, they'll probably find a place and give him maybe one more shot. But it won't be as the everyday first baseman. That's going to be Nate Lowe's job. So it could be as a DH, or it could just be a guy on the roster waiting for his chance if there's an injury or something bears itself out. Of course, while I don't think the Rangers would like to go this route, remember last year, the Rangers had Greg Bird and Ronald Guzman fighting for first, and ultimately Isaiah Kiner-Falefa had such a great spring that they moved Todd Frazier over to first so that he could keep Izzy and Frazier in the lineup. I don't think the Rangers are necessarily hoping that this is how it plays out, but if both Ronald Guzman and Nate Lowe have great springs, and I don't even think Nate Lowe needs to have a great spring. I think he's probably going to be the first baseman. Perhaps Nate Lowe moves over to third just to give Guzzi another shot at getting everyday opportunities at first. But I don't see it playing out that way. This one from John Dowdy. Can Lowe or Guzman play third if they both shine in spring training? No, fitting. I probably should read through all the questions and organize them. I'm just kind of rattling them off. Guzman can't. He's a lefty. He would not play third. Nate Lowe has played third in the past. Nate Lowe, in theory, could play third, but not Ronald Guzman. Second question from John Dowdy. Why can't the Rangers spend money now and sign someone for multiple years that will help us when we're ready to compete? Why wait? So that's a great question. And this collective bargaining agreement is to blame here. The reality is most players reach free agency around 29, 30, 31. Really, 30, 31 is more common. So not everyone's Adrian Beltre, who's just outstanding pretty much through his 30s. A lot of guys really begin to slow down 32, 33. So, John, the best answer to your question is this. George Springer was the number one position player free agent out there. George Springer, though, is kind of in that category we just talked about. He's 31 years old. He turns 32 this season. So the idea is this. You want to sign a guy and time it up so that guy is still able to produce in all likelihood at a high level worth the money you're paying him when you're competing again. It doesn't do the Rangers or any team in the Rangers position much good to sign a guy like George Springer, who 2-3 years from now, when the Rangers feel like hopefully they can be big time contenders, and the reality is more likely 3 than 2, but 2 is a possibility. Now you're talking about a guy who's 34, 35. Could George Springer still be really, really good at this level, the level he's at now at 34, 35? Sure, he could. The odds are not in his favor, especially as an outfielder. Outfielders, guys who move around more, they tend to decline a little sooner. Very rarely does a guy hit free agency as early as Bryce Harper or Mike Trout. And I think the Rangers would more than happily be in the conversation for a guy who reaches free agency at 26, 27. But because players are under team control for 6 years, you have to make the majors and stick in the majors at a very, very young age. So a guy like Juan Soto, would fit that category. A guy like Ronald Acuna Jr., had he not signed that extension, would have fit in that category. But most of the free agents, including the ones this year, don't. Now, next year, Trevor Story is a guy we've talked about, and I'm sure there's a question regarding Trevor Story. He's 29, 30, but the Rangers are going to be 1 year closer to where they want to be. So adding a guy like Trevor Story might make more sense. So the reality is the collective bargaining agreement really hurts teams like the Rangers from a fan's perspective, fans who want to see activity, who, even if the team is rebuilding, want that off-season acquisition that they can latch onto. But the way the collective bargaining agreement works, as tough as it is for a fan to swallow, it's what's best for the building of the team, not committing money to guys who aren't going to be performing at a high level when you need them to be within the timeline of your rebuild, if that makes sense. All right, this one from Harrison. If Jose Leclerc proves he's healthy this season, is he traded before the deadline? Seems like a guy multiple teams would be interested in. Harrison, the reality is any team rebuilding, is going to have conversations about pretty much all their relievers. The one guy on the Rangers who maybe they would consider holding on to is Jonathan Hernandez, just because the level of control they have in him and how impressive he's been. But there's so much volatility with relievers. And yeah, the short answer to your question is yes. If Jose Leclerc is performing at a desirable level, then I'm sure there'll be conversations about him. This one from Bryce Bills. Why do the Rangers struggle so mightily with talent development, and what have the Rangers done to improve upon it? That's a great question, Bryce. I mean, that's really the $1 million or multi-million-dollar question. And I think, it's fair to ask, is it the drafting or is it the developing? And the reality is it's probably both. It's probably not just all one or all the other. The Rangers have made a lot of financial investment into R&D and technology to try and improve their resources in gauging the development and enhancing the ability to develop these players. It's not something that's going to just overnight bear its fruit. This is something they did about 2 years ago, and it's probably something that takes, you think about the lifespan of a minor leaguer to really start paying off dividends. So we're talking 3, 4, 5 years. So I think what is, a fair reflection is that the Rangers have a lot of guys who have not played in Double-A, some of whom would have played last year had Double-A happened, who are of some level of appeal. And the Rangers believe those guys are really going to, show, I guess, the baseball world their level of talent. And it's why some people believe the Rangers system is actually better than its ranking because, sight unseen, right? It's tough to rank guys sight unseen. And it's also tough to rank guys who are not performing at a high level at the higher levels. The higher you are up that chain, up that ladder, the more credence there's given to your performance. Well, the Rangers, out of sight, out of mind, guys like Luis Angel Acuna, Ricky Vanasco, even a guy like Josh Young, who hasn't played Double-A or Triple-A, a guy like Davis Wenzel, Justin Foscue, they didn't get a chance to play last year. You got Maximo Acosta, guys who have come up, Byron Laura. They haven't played at the higher levels. Those are the guys that we really got to monitor as far as they're developing. This one from GGJ0561. Who will be the surprise roster ad from the NRI group? The NRI group is the Rangers non-roster invites. Those are guys like, an example, Delino DeShields, who was signed to a minor league deal, not a major league contract, but given a non-roster invite to camp. That means he's not on the 40-man roster, but he is given an invite to big league camp. So the question is surprises. So I don't know if these guys are surprised, and I never quite know, when people use the word surprise, like I guess it's all relative. Like what's a surprise to you might not be to me. What might be a surprise to me might not be to you. I'll tell you the guys who I think have a really good chance of making the team, NRI guys. And this one might be the biggest surprise because he has been out of sight, out of mind due to injuries, and that's Matt Bush. Now, got to see Matt Bush pitch, but Matt Bush is a guy who apparently is throwing the ball really well, similar to like he was before all the injuries. He's a guy worth considering. Ian Kennedy is a guy who, I don't think they just brought in for no reason. Again, don't know if it's a surprise, but he's another guy worth considering. And then, other guys who I think are going to make it, I think you're going to see Brock Holt make it. I think Charlie Culberson has a really good shot of making it. I think Delino DeShields has a really good shot of making it. If the Rangers feel like they need that true backup center fielder, it could be Delino. A surprise from a position player group, and I don't expect the Rangers to go this direction, but a surprise would be Andy Ibanez. If the Rangers really want to totally lean into their young guys and not start veteran Brock Holt at third, instead have Brock Holt as your utility infielder and start Andy Ibanez at third, a guy that they once invested more than $1 million in. They've certainly invested a lot of time in Ibanez, who now is going to be 28 in a month. Is it now or never for Andy Ibanez? He's a guy who, perhaps could be a surprise. All right. Question from Will Long 20. Other than the big shortstop free agents, are there other potential free agents the Rangers may be looking at next season? That's another really good question. So we've talked ad nauseum about all the great shortstops that, as of this time are scheduled to be free agents. They could always sign extensions, but Javi Baez, Carlos Correa, We talked about, of course, Trevor Story. We've talked about Corey Seager, Marcus Simeon, another guy as well. But that's not all the Rangers need. Now, it might be the only big fish type of deal that they pursue next offseason, but there are other guys as well. And there's another guy, we talked about Trevor Story. Well, Trevor Story is a local guy. There's another local guy who very well could be a free agent, and that is Clayton Kershaw. If he reaches free agency, wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy perhaps the Rangers consider. You've got, I think Trevor Bauers, there's some sort of option. I'm just thinking of pitchers. Another guy, and by the way, Francisco Lindor is also still possibly a free agent. Max Scherzer, he's an older guy. Don't see it now. Now Clayton Kershaw's not a young either, but maybe Clayton Kershaw's the type of guy you sign because he's going to set the right tone. Chris Bryant is another guy. If the Rangers want to double up on position players, he could perhaps be their third baseman or first base. Unlikely they move him to first. Maybe they see him more as an outfield fit. The Rangers could be in need of a corner outfielder, but I really would look at the pitching market. I think that there's a chance the Rangers, whether it's next offseason or the one after, are very aggressive in the pitching market. All right, from Devin, which Rangers prospects are impacted most by the canceled minor league season? I guess, Devin, the list is too long to really name. I mean, I think the guys that some of whom I mentioned, Luis Angel Acuna, Maximo Acosta, Byron Lora, these young guys who they really need that development. Justin Foscue, guy that they just drafted. I think Josh Young. It really affects all of them. The guys who it doesn't affect are the guys who are hurt and wouldn't have really done anything anyway, or the organizational guys who you're not really as concerned about their development. So I would just say in general, I would tell you that it probably impacted the Rangers more than most teams because of where they are on their timeline and how much that development and progression of their minor league guys is significant to what they're trying to do. The other question from Devin, who's your way too early prediction for the Rangers draft? And who you like better between Rocker and Leiter? Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter. Kumar Rocker and Leiter both at Vanderbilt, both sons of professional athletes. Tracy Rocker was a former NFL player, and of course Al Leiter, Jack's dad, Mark Leiter, his uncle, major league pitchers. I guess I like Rocker more. I think from everything I've read, and I haven't seen these guys beyond just a game on ESPN Plus. Jack Leiter's got more of a refined pitching makeup, whereas Kumar Rocker's just got incredible raw ability. My way too early prediction, I think it would be kind of cool if the Rangers drafted Jordan Lawler, the shortstop out of Jesuit. I haven't seen him play yet. I do want to go and see him at some point. But there's a lot of philosophical debates between, do you go position player? Do you go pitcher? Which is the safer, which has the higher floor, type of thing. Because you definitely don't want to screw this pick up. You don't have to get the best player, the second best player in the draft with the number 2 overall pick. If you get one of the guys who ends up being a top 10 player from this draft class, you're going to end up being really happy about it. But you don't want to just totally miss the boat on that pick. And there are a lot of philosophical questions. Mock drafts right now are so tough because there was such a lost year last year. Guys like Jack Leiter, who Jack Leiter barely has any college innings under his belt. So it's just tough to evaluate. This one from Kinsler, 311. Can Sherton Apostle hit well enough to be a first baseman? I mean, I think that's the hope. I have doubts, as far as the discipline at the plate. If I had a guess, I don't see Sherton Apostle as this team's first baseman of the future, but he definitely has the profile to hit as well as a first baseman. All right, we got another question here. It might also be from the same gentleman, Kinsler 311. And these are several questions. With the changing of the guard at shortstop, do you see IKF really developing into a star? I don't think IKF develops into a star. I think he can be a really solid player on a winning team, but I don't know, he needs to take another step offensively if he wants to be a starting player on a team that's, vying for a pennant or a World Series. I think, he could be a tremendous 10th man on a team, but he definitely has earned the right to play shortstop this year. Can the Rangers solve the second base issue with Solak, or do you see Odor continuing to take up space? No, Nick Solak's going to be this opening day second base, or the opening day and likely everyday second baseman. Again, is it a long-term solution? time will tell, but I think the Rangers are at least encouraged by the possibility that, second base isn't going to be a hole that they feel that they need to imminently fill. Does Chris Woodward get another couple years to become competitive? And when do the Rangers actually start seeing some pieces come together to compete for a division? I think you start seeing some pieces this year. If a guy like Josh Young and Leody Taveras, or guys like Young and Taveras start to develop and show what they can do, I think Chris Woodward does have a little bit of rope here because of the fact that this is a rebuild. If they didn't want to give him that rope before the season, would have been the time to make a change. But if you're going to enter a rebuild, with a manager, you got to at least give that manager time to grow into that team or let the team grow into what they can be. Does Chris Davis stay consistent, and can he offer more than Chu, whoever he replaces as a whole? Does he get DH time, or can he fit in the outfield? I don't even know if Chris Davis makes the team. My guess is I would not have high hopes, high expectations for Chris Davis. That trade the Rangers made was really more about getting the youngsters like Jonah Heim than it was about Chris Davis and taking Elvis's contract off the books for not this year, but next year. All right. We got some more questions here from the Twitter. So let me quickly get to those. All right. This one from Neat Geek 83. Will the broadcast teams be traveling with the teams this season? TV will not travel this year. Over on the radio side, we won't be traveling through the All-Star break. We might be traveling afterwards. All right. From my pal Brian Broadus. What does the spring training jersey number tell you about the potential of a player? There's some really good players with high potential who have higher jersey numbers, but usually that means you're not in the 40-man roster unless you chose that number. You want to have a lower number, at least not 98. If your number is 98, 97, 96, maybe you're you don't have as bright of the future. But again, Josh Young is 70 because he's not on the 40-man. So, it just depends on the guy. All right, from Mad Dog, how's Josh Young looking? He looks good. And in what limited opportunities we've had to see him, he just looks really comfortable. He looks like a guy who gets it. He's a baseball player, not an athlete trying to grow into a baseball player. He's not a guy that's got freak athleticism, but he's a guy who just does things so well fundamentally. Another question from Chase. I like what I'm seeing from Gallows so far in these 3 spring games. Did he change anything over the offseason? His stance looks the same. I think he obviously went back to the drawing board to try and recreate what he produced in 2019. One thing he talked about was he changed his bat. He did have a different weight distribution on his old bat, which was more top heavy. He's now got a bat that's a little more evenly distributed from a weight standpoint. From Daniel, from what you were seeing and hearing, has Ronald Guzman turned the corner offensively? Can he win the first base job? Don't see him winning the first base job. I'm optimistic about improvements, but again, it's really tough to gauge what the Dominican Winter League results mean. Could mean great things. It might not mean much. And spring training, obviously, it's really tough to gauge that as well. I would say if pressed against a wall, I would say that ultimately Ronald Guzman's not the answer at first. But again, he's a guy who's got the type of work ethic that you want to believe in him. And if he gets an opportunity, hopefully he can take advantage of it. I still see Ronald Guzman as a guy who, maybe is best as a platoon player who starts against righties, which righties obviously make up most of the starts, but not against lefties. But I don't know if it's on this team because it seems like the Rangers really want Nate Lowe to be their guy at first base. All right, some more questions here before we wrap this up. From Nathan, a few names you think will exceed expectations this year. Example, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa was that guy last year. I don't know what expectations are for David Dahl, but I'm really, high on him. I really like that acquisition. Again, I don't know what expectations are for Nick Solak. I'd say that I think he will really outperform his production from last year. And I think I'll give you a surprise name who might be a major leaguer by the end of the season is Fernario Zuna, a guy who's he's pitched in 12 professional innings or something like that, former infielder who's been converted. All right. Sean, do you envision the Rangers being active around the trade deadline? Perhaps they try to flip some of their surplus of players. Yes, I do expect them to be active. I think Joey Gallo is a guy whose name will be talked about. If Kyle Gibson's, putting together a good year, he could be discussed. Jordan Lyles, any of their relievers, I do expect them to be active. And then Chauncey kind of asked the same question. What's the likelihood the Rangers make trades before the deadline? That kind of the same answer. From Joe, which of the currently projected pitchers will provide the biggest surprise in 2021? Same for position players. I guess I kind of answered that, Joe, with the question from Nathan. I'm trying to see if there's someone else that maybe I could add to that. Uh, I mean, again, I just don't know what people's expectations are. I'm really excited by Dane Dunning. I do like Dane Dunning. Got a chance to speak with Steve Stone, the former major league pitcher and White Sox broadcaster. He's really high on Dane Dunning, and I really trust Steve's judgment on these sorts of things. Another guy, I guess, of the young guys, I'm hopeful of a bounce back for Colby Allard. And I'm curious to see if Taylor Hearn does get a chance to start, what that looks like. All right. And then I think we got one more from John. Who gets the third base job and who's the utility man? My guess is Brock Holt's the third baseman and Charlie Culberson is the utility guy. All right, there you go. That's our Q&A. I will do another one of these here next week. Thanks so much for sending in your questions. If you've got more, or if you've got questions that didn't go answered, tweet me at Jarrett Sandler. We'll do my best to give you the best and honest answer I can. Talk to you guys later.